beyond the skies. You and I, we're breaking bounds on Baobab.
Required a significant amount of conversation and planning. And I must say, I thoroughly enjoyed the levels of what was required in terms of leveraging the strengths that I had, including ones that I checked out by studying a strengths finders test, which put me as an achiever and also someone who looks at focus and also is disciplined. That was my first realization, if I may say so. The need for us to realize that strengths and weaknesses are important and they matter. But more importantly is the understanding that your strengths are the ones that will open doors for you, rather than an overinvestment in trying to curtail the weaknesses that you possess. So being able to identify and prioritize my growth in specifically the areas of strengths allowed me to also start on the journey of knowing myself. And this is something that I want to also have a conversation around today, truly understanding and appreciating that your emotions are important. How you regulate them is also primarily important, and how you interact with people based on your understanding of self, and also how you regulate your emotions in order to be out there and engaging people, and not underrating this skill as being potent in you pursuing the targets and goals that you set for yourself. And secondly, thus appreciating the power of communication. And here we are not talking about just being articulate, but also mastering active listening. Because when you start to listen actively, there are salient things that come before you. And my perspective, I must say, has been shifted by that particular understanding. Back to you, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Edwin, for that very comprehensive picture that you've painted for us. One thing I'm picking is active listening. So today, may we all actively listen so we can have a fruitful conversation. So over to you, Wairimu. You can walk us through your journey, where your career started and where it is at right now.
Hey everyone. So Wairimu here. I have about 10 years experience with ops. So I've had experience. I consider myself more of a generalist. So I've had experience in very different parts of the organization. My career started early on. I started off in a credit company, and then I moved on to a global company, and in another of those. So for me, my journey started off, I think, just to summarize in terms of mental health, I would understand this discussion from a personal perspective, because for me, I consider myself now a mild workaholic, but I was a very strong workaholic when I started off. In my first job, I remember I barely took leave days. In fact, I used to wonder what people do when they go on leave. It's until I moved to a job where it was mandatory to take leave days that I realized, oh, actually rest isn't so bad. So I've had quite a journey in terms of even the kind of managers I've had and how they've impacted mental health for me, because I'm a strong believer in, and I think it's tested and proven, that your environment changes you more than you change it. So I'm a strong believer in the fact that as much as you can take a lot of effort yourself in terms of how to prioritize your mental health, choosing the right environment go a longer way, because it's easier for you to just it's easier for the environment to affect you more than it is for you to affect it. So for me, I think that's basically it. I don't know if Michelle, you want to say more. I'll just say the rest as we move on. But yeah.
Thank you so much, Wairimu, for that very, personal description. Yeah, you talked about leave days, and it's a very interesting thing where you're forced to take leave. That is very interesting to see. Happy to exchange notes later. So Wairimu,
Yeah.
as someone who's struggled with ADHD, right? How has that influenced your leadership, right, and approach to work? Because over the years, I've seen you climb the corporate ladder where you've been managing global teams. So you who has gone through ADHD, how has that impacted your leadership?
I think for the longest time I did know. So when I started off working, I wasn't aware that I had it. It has its element, which is like hyperfixation. So I think like in my very first job, I could really focus and give so much of myself. And I think we all know for a major part of it, there's been a lot of shift in corporate now. But when I started off, hustle culture was very much, glorified. So it was the more you give, whether companies noticed it consciously or subconsciously, they somehow rewarded people who were overextending themselves. People were always available, going above and beyond. And I was very good at that, which I came to learn later on, uh, was partly because of my ADHD. And so when I moved jobs and then COVID struck, and then I was working from home, which now with less distractions, I was way more focused, which meant sometimes I'll find myself seated from 7 to 7, barely woken up, like I'm eating from my desk. I'm not doing all that. So I think 2 years ago or something, that's when I discovered I had ADHD. And that's because at the time I'd also gone through some serious burnout, was experiencing like very, very serious burnout. So when I was having the whole checks of what, I discovered, oh, I have ADHD, and sometimes I push myself too much. So it really affected, it really shifted my perspective, especially given that I took quite some time to get out of that funk. They say this, but when you're a workaholic, you don't take it seriously. They tell you that when your body decides for you, it will really decide for you. So when my body shut down, I expected it, a month, and then I'm fine. And then it took almost a year. But at the time, my second job was very more structured. I had very supportive bosses, so I was able to communicate that, hey, I'm really struggling. And given that I'd been like, I think I don't know if the culture was just great, or that also I had been a very good performer for the most part. So I had very understanding, setups. So I was able to like scale down slowly, just support. So in a way, I think that's when it firmed up for me how important it is for an environment to be inclusive and to allow people to work in different ways. And again, when you also have a bit of you that's different, there's a way you don't work the same way. But it was hard for me, I think, to realize at the time, because I had the privilege of working in an organization that was pro remote work, pro hybrid, pro, even I think my boss also had ADHD. So already there was a lot of resources, I would say. There's a lot of resources and awareness about mental health within the organization. So for me, it wasn't a very strong shift. But when I interacted with people once I got it and said, hey, I'm getting this flexibility, I can do this or that, I realized it's not a very common thing that happens in a lot of industries. Like half the time people are punished. People even don't get jobs for just being different. So, and if you have mental health struggles, you become like, how can I put it? It's like you're dragging the company down or something like that. So, yeah, I think for me, that was mostly it. So, even in terms of leadership, it really shapes how now, I think I was already that kind of leader because I was already different. So, I understood things from a different person's kind of perspective. So, I was able to understand that you have to give flexibility, one, to people, because different people work differently. I've always been a morning person. I know people who work at night. So they'll check in at 11, 12, then they'll do it till later. I'd rather start in the morning and end later. Also, you have things escalate downwards, right? So how you set the tone as a leader is how people do it. So if you're working all the time, you may give the pressure for everyone to work all the time. People need to see you take leave days. People need to see you, don't text people past 10. There needs to be initiative from a leadership perspective in terms of how you're accommodating or setting the tone with your leadership. So there was a lot of lessons, I think, ideally, based on my own experience, based on how I saw the leadership accommodate me. And I know this happens in a lot of organizations now. So you'll see people who just, support in very many ways. But for me, I think without going on too much, that was it. For me, it was learning how to be more inclusive, learning how to see things from the other perspective, and also setting the tone myself.
Thank you so much, Remo, for that. One thing I'm picking is your environment changes you more than you can change it. I never thought about it that way. Most times we are going into organizations, of course, we all want to make an impact and make change, but it's nice to be cognizant of the fact that your environment will, in the long run, change you. So, Edwin, moving to you, you advocate for mental health so much, and I know you've worked in very prestigious companies. So, with all these people you've interacted with, what are the common workplace stresses you've seen amongst young professionals? And how can we, as young people, tackle that and handle them, in a better way? Over to you, Edwin.
The reality of the world we're living in is such that we want to prove ourselves. You've been given an opportunity in a prestigious organization. You want to really prove yourself. And then you have these unrealistic deadlines that you have to meet. You have to compete in a high performance setup. You have this fear of not being enough. And they're constantly ruminating and playing in your mind. And then, the other thing is that we are scrolling social media. We're looking at someone else and we're seeing they're having the life that you desire, and you're working yourself to the bones trying to achieve that. And it seems like you're not getting there. So what happens is that from a peak of very many different anxiety triggers come about. Number one, you have the job insecurity. You don't know if tomorrow you'll have this job. You still have the lack of work-life balance, where everyone was talking about the fact that she was a workaholic, because you have to prove yourself. And then also, just as a point, there's also the toxicity that happens.
For millennium.
And Washa seems to support me on that. Is it Nyasha Kembo? So that toxic environment that you're in, and poor leadership that comes because you're a young person, you're expecting to be mentored, you're expecting to be at the forefront of what you're doing, and then it doesn't rhyme with your expectations. So how then do you tackle this? So one of the first things that I normally tell people is boundaries are really important. Boundaries for yourself, boundaries in getting to know what is the next level that you want. What exactly do you want out of your life? And for that, you have to find a space in between the madness that is happening around you to just zone out all the noise and ask yourself this very pertinent question: what do I really want out of life? Here's a crazy thing. Most of our lives are pretty nail those points. You have to really nail those goals. You really have to be competitive. But once you start to ask yourself relevant questions like why am I doing this? Why am I so enamored by this idea that I need to be highly successful? And why am I even being successful? For what reason? That is the starting point for you to diffuse and go to the next level. But not just that, having set clear boundaries based on an understanding of where you're going, there's also that aspect of prioritizing self-awareness, like I've just mentioned earlier, making time for yourself, getting to be more self-aware, getting to understand your emotions, getting to know why you feel this type of way. That could even be, certainly not even based on the job that you're doing. It could be something historical. But now, because you're in a high, either toxic or high demand environment, or you're feeling insecure because you're doing so much and no one is seeing what you're doing, suddenly all those things just come to the brim and force you to act in a particular way. Misha.
Thank you so much, Edwin. Self-awareness is really key. I remember one time a mentor told me, when you are, when you're going after something, you need to ask yourself, am I after it because I want people to see that I'm making it, or does it actually make me happy, right? So thank you so much for sharing your personal journeys and where you've been and where you're at. Thank you for being vulnerable. So we're going to move into the second segment where we're going to talk about workplace challenges. I'm sure many of us who have been working have gone through these challenges. So Edwin, back to you. So many workplaces, as where Remo had mentioned earlier, have a hustle culture that glorifies overworking. How can we shift that mindset? One, as employees, as young professionals, and two, as leaders who in a few years we'd find ourselves leading teams. So how do we shift that conversation from hustle culture to promoting a more healthy work environment? Hi, Edwin.
Let's understand maybe the household culture for a minute here. And the household culture means we are, as much as possible, quantity over quality. You're doing so much, so longer working hours, longer efforts, in order to somewhat overwhelm and in order for you to be seen and appreciated. So that's the hustle culture. But the question is, for what? Are we glorifying exhaustion? Are we glorifying this idea that to look stressed and haggard and barely just being able to achieve something is the win? So that's the hustle culture. And what are we predicating on? We're finding that a lot of people work themselves to the bone in their 20s, and then by the time they're in their 30s and reach their 40s, they're already tired. And they haven't achieved the success that they so ideally want. What tends to happen is that they're broken. They're broken, and you find someone who was so invested in doing something else decides, you know what, I'm going to give up and I'm going to start a farm somewhere. And that becomes a cultural shift now, where people are traveling around the world. They've lost even the essence of what this life is all about and choosing something simpler. So here's the thing. I think the idea is, can we still go back to the idea that creativity, the idea that when we were younger and we had a broader aspect of what life was all about, can be something that we can choose for? So shifting even for leaders to model, if you're a leader, model healthier habits, taking the breaks that you need, because breaks are essential. How many of us can honestly say that when you work from 7 to whatever godforsaken hour you work for, do you take a break? Or are you this kind of automaton where you're so focused and attentive and yes, I'm going to do this, I'm going to nail, not realizing that your physiology requires you to take breaks for you to be able to offer optimum service to anything you're doing. Here's the thing that we forget. Attention is valuable. And whoever has your attention, you're enslaved to. So is it your job that has all your attention to the point where you are willing to invest a bit of your time to really discover why you are on this earth and for what reason? So it goes back to redefine success. I really desire for all of us to redefine success. What is success to you? Is it that plum job? Is it that paycheck that you're getting? Is it that car? Is it that house? Is it that travel? Redefine it to something that, you know, even if it's within reach and you have it, it will make you happy. It will allow you to have a wholesome life. A wholesome life is one that is balanced, where it's not just about the money, but you also have a social wealth where you're interacting with people. It's not just that, but you're also connecting with family and so much more. So workplaces that value well-being outperform those that don't. It's proven scientifically so. So what kind of work-life balance is this that we're asking for? And can we move from the hustler sort of like setup to working smarter and knowing how truly to work our minds, our bodies in order to optimize and to ensure that we're having longer term performance in our organizations? Back to you, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Edwin, for that. He's mentioned something about values. I think there's a time we were talking with Edwin and he was like telling me to list my values, those that I really think I value in terms of work. And at first I used to think it was salary, but then I realized, oh yeah, there's impact that actually matters more. So I think I'm urging all of you to think about, if you're looking to get into a role, what is that one thing apart from monetary value that should not be missing? So thank you for that. Wairimo, so you mentioned that you had very supportive bosses. All of us are really envious of that, like that you can just talk to them and tell them, I'm really struggling here, right? So how can we, who might not be very blessed to have, employers that we can approach, start those difficult conversations of, I'm struggling mentally, I need help, and not being seen as, weak or insufficient. So how do you start that conversation for those people who are not as lucky as you to have very supportive bosses, or having bosses that have gone through that? Over to you, Arimo.
I think it's very important for us to understand how your company is structured in terms of mental health resources. What have they provided as the avenue for you to get help in case of such things. I find most, especially the very well-structured organizations, tend to have a way to go about it. And sometimes if you already have a boss and you've identified that they're very toxic, it doesn't necessarily mean they are the right person to approach, right? Sometimes you can go through someone else, someone who's closer to them that you get along with, or you can go to someone else who's their main role in that organization. Maybe they are a HR who can help you moderate those conversations. So I would ideally think if you've already had a rough time talking to this person who happens to be your boss, find another outlet, find someone else who can support you, ensure you're also documenting the issues that you have. But with your boss as well, if you have to, you can always think about the right time, right? Because you've worked with the person for a while, you can tell when is the right time to approach this person and inform them this is what is happening. And then when you approach them, be very clear. You're not just going and telling them, hey, I'm really struggling, and then that's it. Be very clear. You're struggling. What do you want? How do you want the support? How will you still execute your capabilities? So you can go and say, hey, I'm really struggling. Mentally, I'm really down. I don't think I will be able to be coming into the office every day. I can be able to work from home some days. I'll still meet all my goals. I'll still be informing you about the work that I'm doing, just to create that so that they can feel that this is how I am struggling. This is how you can, sorry, 1 second. I'm struggling. This is how you can support me, and this is how I'll still work, right? So that's one way to go about it. I've had an experience where I had I think these situations are very, very difficult because sometimes you can be in a great job, but you don't have the best boss because those two things sometimes happen. So I had a situation where I wasn't struggling, but I had a boss who was just, I used to feel very nervous around him. Like he'll just go off over everything. Everything just used to turn into something bigger than it should. And I was like, you know what, I'm tired. I'm going to quit this job. But we all know that is easier said than done. Sometimes you want to quit, but you don't have the next job. You have responsibilities. Maybe you don't come from privilege. So many things to go around it. So I had to sit down with myself and be like, okay, I had to understand their personality, and I was like, this person just likes sorry, work-life balance. So this person just likes they prefer feeling like they have a bit of control issues, right? So they want to always be aware of what you're doing, what you're not doing. So, and they don't trust what you can do. So I remember I just approached them one day and I was like, hey, I'd like to schedule a meeting, and I want us to align on what your expectations are from me in my role. Like, what do you expect me to do? And then post these, I want to be putting in weekly check-ins, right? So that we can assess, this is what happened last week. This is what I did. Are you happy? Is there something you want me to change? And it honestly improved how we work. I was making the compromise. Unfortunately, I was the one making the entire compromise, but it made my life easier because I figured it's not the best solution if you're struggling, but I figured that I unfortunately need them more than they need me, which is not the best environment to be in. But there was a way to make my life slightly easier by being the one now who meets them. I'm trying to figure out, how do you work? How can I meet you in a way where you're not always on my case, you're not always getting on my nerves, but you can leave me alone. So if I tell you next week we'll catch up on what I did this week, you don't need to be texting me every second that, hey, have you done? Have you done? So sometimes there's that compromise that you have to make, unfortunately. If it works, it works. If it doesn't, you find other ways to solve things.
Kindly let's
nyuma yange njagala nyuma yange njagala you are taking what was the moment?
sorry, Wairimo, for that. You can carry on. Sorry for that interruption.
Yeah. So in summary, what I'm saying is it's very important, one, to find out what resources are usually in your organization. So once you know the resources, you can know how to raise, this is what I'm doing. How do companies usually support you? Do they allow for flexibility, etc.? If you're very afraid of talking to your direct boss, go through someone else who's close, HR, or someone who's close to them, or someone you're close to who can tell you how to deal with the situation. And if you can talk to your boss, just approach it with more of explaining what you're struggling with, explaining how you want support, and then explaining how you'll still manage to meet your expectations or not, so that they know if they need to support you in any other way.
Thank you so much, Remo, for that. So, what I'm picking from both Edwin and Remo, one is Remo said, whenever you get into a company, figure out what resources are there. I've had companies that have mental health days. I'm yet to experience that.
You will.
Mental health days. So I like the opportunity where she's telling us you don't have to talk to, whoever you're reporting to directly if they sort of like tick you off. So you can always find another channel to communicate. The one thing that I really, really loved from your insights is one, most times, maybe when we're struggling mentally, we don't communicate what we're doing. So, yes, we can be overwhelmed, we can be doing so much. But then, if we're not communicating what we're doing, then these people who have a control issue would be literally on our case thinking there's nothing we're doing. So, over communicate. Say what you're doing. If it means scheduling those one-on-ones, if it means documenting your work. A friend once told me, anytime you go into a job, open an Excel sheet and every day just log in whatever you're doing so that someday someone says you're not putting in the work. I mean, they have to be crazy if they don't see all those rows, right, of work. So thank you for that. So Edwin, I'm thinking that, we need to redefine success. Success is not, and I think our generation has a problem where we go to Instagram, we go to TikTok, whatever we go to, and we see these flashy lifestyles people are having. And or let's not even go to Instagram. You log into LinkedIn and everyone is happy to start a new role, happy to be a CEO, and they're not even 30. And you'd probably ask yourself, what am I doing with my life? But you need to ask yourself, what really matters to me, right? So if impact really matters to me, if I'm making impact in wherever I am I making the impact, right? If visibility is what matters to me, the people who are obsessed with status, am I actually bugging that role after the other? If that's what matters to me, that's fine, right? So we really need to redefine success. What I also picked from Edwin is, can we go back to having creativity in our workplaces, right? We shouldn't be cogs in machines, right? So let's bring out the creativity in the workplaces as leaders, as future leaders in these workplaces. So we'll move on to the next segment where we are talking about practical strategies. I know sometimes it looks like it's all fluff, but I love that our panelists are giving us practical strategies. So I'll go back to you, Edwin. So how do you manage stress? And how do you prevent burnout? Like, if you check Edwin's portfolio, he says he has, I don't know how many clients, but I can tell you for a fact, I see Edwin on Strava. He's always running. He's going to the gym, I don't know how many times. So how are you not burning out? Yeah. So you can tell us, what strategies are you using?
Okay, so first of all, let's start from the fact that I'm a habits coach. Therefore, it has allowed me to realize that if you habitualize your life, then there's a lot of benefit that comes or accrues to you. But before we get into that, let's dial back a little bit. The fact that most stress is unrecognized until it's already toxic. So you being able to instinctively recognize that stress is building up is a critical thing. Knowing that stress is also an emotion and it is as relevant as all the other emotions that you need to be aware of in terms of self-awareness. So even for me as a habits coach, one of the things that we do is I invest quite a bit of time in nurturing my clients in understanding the full suite of emotions that you have. Brené Brown talks about 87 emotions that you possibly have. 87. How many do you know? How many have you even interacted with? We know the basic one: sadness. Today I'm sad. Today I'm furious. Today my boss made me just angry. And anger seems to be like the pervading idea that most of us have. But recognition is important. Now, once you recognize, the second thing that comes up is resetting. And resetting is what I do quite well. Every time you see me running, it's not that I just love running. Okay, I've learned to love running over time. But it started from this idea that I could reset. And resetting is you just simply doing a couple of things. Number one, the exercise that you do when you go to the gym. It is the affirmations that you do because you're resetting that cog in your brain that's telling you you're not good enough, or even the journaling that you do just to process the things that you have to work with all throughout the week. I mean, the insecurities, the toxic environment, and all these are things that you have to do. And then when you reset, and resetting here also, you have to understand that from habit, there are things that trigger you. It could be your environment where you are, it could be your job that is stressing you, it could be the people that are around you, it could be the time of day, it could be even the emotion that is overhacking and coming over you all this time, because there are weeks when you're just feeling like so low, you're wondering what's up here. So once you start to do that, then know the recharging. And the recharging here is go and do the hobbies, the things that you used to enjoy. Why is it that we don't do them anymore? Take the walk, do the reading, do an interesting thing. Most of us don't do that because we are so ingrained in the targets, the need to compete and be seen at the very front of everyone else. But realize that when you recharge, when you recognize, you reset and recharge, you're actually bringing the best version of yourself to the job that you're doing. And not just that, but also there's this wonderful thing called time blocking. I don't know if you've been able to interact with it, but it's about being able to know that based on how our brain works, there are segments in which you can really be effective. So block that time off to do high quality work. Don't let all these other things that are distractors come into that and spoil what you're doing. Find ways in which you know when you'll respond to emails, when you do high priority work, and when you're at your best to be able to do certain things. Understand how your brain works. That is so critical because it allows you to also manage stress and move forward in the best way. But most importantly, mindfulness. Mindfulness is knowing where you are at any time. And social media sort of like takes that away from us, because you'll see someone sitting somewhere that's so wonderful, a place that's so beautiful, but they're there just scrolling because they're looking for the next dopamine hit. And if you can release yourself from that dopamine entanglement, what then can happen is that you can be mindful of what's around you, and you can also be taking care of yourself, because you need to listen to your body, you need to listen to your environment. Those are the few thoughts I can share right now.
Wow, that's very rich. So you talked about mindfulness. Many times we don't know how we're feeling. Have you ever been in a situation where you're just irritable? You don't know what's exactly happening, but you're very irritable. So we need to start practicing mindfulness. I like that he said you need to reset. I don't know how many of us take at least 30 minutes to work out, because the hormones you get from that really just energize you. You tend to forget whatever madness is going on in your life. Also, figuring out the triggers. Edwin has mentioned about the environment. I mean, it goes back to what Wairimo said at the beginning, like your environment changes you more than you change it. I think that's very powerful. I think also him talking about recharging, like doing something that you like, just not being stuck in routine about productivity and not, recharging. Time blocking, like when do you respond to emails? When do you recharge? When do you even just sit still, right? So these are very practical. Thank you, Edwin, for that. So Wairimo, I'll move over to you. So we were talking about boundaries, right? And high pressured environments. And you mentioned how you as a leader don't text people, late hours expecting their responses. I remember this one time where I had to remove my WhatsApp blue ticks because there's this particular person who used to text me asking for reports probably at 11 p.m. and that would really, put me in a weird zone. So how do you continue to set healthy boundaries in very fast-paced and high-pressured environments?
Is this question in terms of you as an employee or as a leader?
You can tackle it two-pronged as an employee.
So I think the boundaries, I'll say on both ways. Again, first, I think the culture is what determines how things flow. But even as a person, you can set the boundaries, and ideally set the boundaries early so that it's already set in stone. This person is not to be contacted, etc. I think as a company, one, because hustle culture also, the reason people sometimes won't set those boundaries, but then they go above them, is because if you don't do it, someone else will, and then they'll get the promotions. Like Edwin said, it depends on what your goal is. I find often, initially, when people are starting off in their careers, they're really trying to move up first, and then they'll worry about everything else later. So they tend to compromise a lot in these things. So at that point, it's very likely you may tweak your boundaries if the culture is, leaning towards that. So I think as leaders first, you need to first set boundaries yourself. Message don't message or don't send us for reports past a certain hour. If you've strictly said work hours are this to this, allow people to, work until then. If you unfortunately if you work in remote or you work in organizations with different locations, unfortunately messages will come in at a different time zone. But I used to get messages sometimes and they're like, just check it when you're in office, which means just because I sent it doesn't mean you're supposed to do anything about it until, when it's your time to work. And I think another beautiful thing, I think even in terms of the resources we use, Teams, chats, they now have a thing where you're sending a message, it tells you this person, if you work with people in different time zones, their working hours are 9 to 5, do you want us to send it at 9? So already they have come, there are ways in which the boundaries are naturally getting set. So that's one. Secondly is ensuring that you're not giving your employees way too much workload. So you're able to assess how much workload are you giving them, is it enough? Three is you need to encourage employees to take breaks, right? So encourage them to take breaks. You can provide resources for them to take breaks and all that. So I noticed, like, in our workplace, we have, like, our floor has a pool table. So randomly people just wake up and play pool sometimes so that they can wake up and take a break. So that's a very subconscious thing they'll do, because you'll be tired, you look up and you're like, okay, I see the men do that a lot. So it's small things. They don't look like big things, but they are big things an employer can do that helps set boundaries in terms of how much effort are you putting into the job? Are you waking up? Are you resting? etc. Then, as an employee, proactively communicate that I'm only available from this time to this time, right? So if there's anything urgent, you're unless it's very, very urgent, and half the time you'll have told your manager early on, if there's anything urgent, can you tell me by this time, because I won't be available for that. So there's a lot of communication that goes into these things. Having like an open door policy with your manager, where you get to discuss things openly so that they know I can't, like, personally, I'm not available on Friday evenings from 4. So if anyone, because I have something I need to do, I'll pick up my daughter from school. So because she has sports later. So my boss knows that, right? So they won't reach. So it's more of, communication. Like, hey, I'm only available 8 to 5. Everyone knows. If when someone sends you work, make sure you clearly agreed when is this needed, how urgent is it, so that you can prioritize. And if they say, I need it today, you can say, no, I'm at capacity today, unless maybe tomorrow or next week, or can you go to someone else to do these? Try also not to take up jobs that are not yours, because once you start taking up everyone's role, I hate to break it to you, you will take up everyone's role. It doesn't stop. It gets worse. No one says, oh yeah, we've they'll be like, this person is always available for this and this. So set very clear boundaries about things that are out of your scope, right? And you're like, this is not in my department. Could you check respectfully? This is not in my scope. Could you please check with so and so or something else? Or this is just not. So don't feel the urge to. If you're great, you're great. Don't feel the urge to, do too much, but do enough. Like, do your job at the end of the day. Don't, because sometimes I think the other downside is people who just won't do anything because you also need to be providing value to organizations, but don't get to a point where you have really depleted yourself. You've given them everything, you've given them more than everything. And like Edwin said, the problem is you'll do that in your 20s, and then when you hit your 30s and you hit burnout, likely you'll end up not being useful to them. And then they'll be like, you know what? So manage yourself, set those boundaries, manage yourself, manage your work, communicate a lot with the people around you, communicate with your boss, let people know. It's the same way with friendships, or, we all have those people, oh, I can't tell this person this because they wouldn't take it kindly. Like you teach people how to approach you, how to treat you by what you agree to do and what you agree not to do. So it's more of set a boundary, affirm it, and validate yourself. It's okay to say no to things, because people are very afraid of saying no in organizations. You feel like if I say no, there'll be no, it's okay to say no. Like it's honestly very much okay. So validate yourself. No, yeah, I'm at capacity. You know you're at capacity. Your body tells you it's at capacity. So you're like, this is as much as I can do, and that's about it. So yeah. So that's it. But again, my point always comes back to if you're lucky enough, I hope you can get a good work environment because it makes it so much easier to now set these boundaries at the end of the day. So be very intentional as well about if you can help it, be very intentional about what you're looking for as well in terms of career beyond the money. I know sometimes when you start off, it's not that easy, but maybe as you progress, especially, don't let money be the only thing. Ask about work culture. How do you guys work? Ask your managers. I have a habit of asking managers when I'm interviewing what their management style is, so that I see if it meshes with how I operate. I don't like being micromanaged, so I want to know: do you want me to tell you every little thing, or are you more interested in output? So have how they say in interviews, it's a two-way street. You're not just being interviewed, you're also interviewing the company. So that's also a time to learn what you're getting yourself into. Find out what is the culture. At that point, even ask, how is mental health? How is your work culture? Is it hybrid, remote? Do you allow in case of such things? How is your management style? How are the reporting structures? All that stuff.
Thank you so much, Wairimu. Very amazing gems over there. So just to recap what Wairimu said, in Kenya, for those who are not Kenyans, we're normally told usi overdo because as Edwin said, you will work and burn yourself out through your 20s, and then in your 30s, by the time you're reaching mid-30, you will not have the capacity to work. So thank you for reminding that, and it's done in a healthy way, right? It's not that you're being rude, but you are trying to set boundaries and affirm yourself. I mean, you're not a bad person for not trying to do everyone's job, right? Just do what is within your capacity. I love that she's saying how employers and even leaders can see how they can make environments more calm for employees. So recently I went to an insurance company. It's called ICA Lion here in Kenya. And they decided, because their new workforce is, Gen Zs, they've decided to put warm colors in their, organization so that they can feel warm when they're coming into their work. That was very thoughtful, right? So as employers, we need to think about that. As employees, set your boundaries and make sure that you affirm yourself. I like the other thing where most times as young professionals, when you're looking for a job, we always think that, yeah, it's a do or die situation. But Wairimu is here reminding us it's a two-way street. You're also trying to see, is this a fit, right? Most times you want the money, but really, maybe it's not a fit, right? So basically, if I'm looking at myself, I need a flexible work environment, right? So if someone is telling me they are fixated on me going to work every day of the week and they're not trying to, be a bit flexible on going 2 or 3 days, then most probably they will not agree to that, even when I step into that place, right? Think about what are the mental health resources in the company. Most definitely, if they don't have any, you will not go there telling them that you're overwhelmed, and they will understand. They already think that you're a machine and you need to work, right? So thank you, Wairimu, for that. So we'll move into the last segment as time is really flying. So we're talking about, sorry for that, career growth and mental health. So I'll begin with Edwin and then end with Wairimu as we wrap it up. So Edwin, what skills, like you've given us a practical step-by-step process on how we can build mental resilience. Is there anything we can add, apart from resetting our lives, like learning how to reset our lives, learning how to recharge and time blocking? Is there any other thing we can do to build mental resilience? Because we're not guaranteed that we'll all land, nice bosses like Wairimu. So how can we build that mental resilience? Yeah.
Okay, so let's take it practical here and ask, what was the one thing that I mentioned that was critical in this journey? And you'll notice it was self-awareness. Self-awareness can be habitualized in your life. From this very moment, out of this session, you can go and spend some time getting to know yourself better. We spend quite a bit of time in taking up professional certifications because we want to get those papers and to be seen in a certain way. Not knowing, you may have all those papers, and then the one thing that destroys you is the lack of self-awareness. Here's the thing. Starting on this journey, and my suggestion, because this is what I do with my clients, is get on to understand Brené Brown's 87 emotions. Here's a quick thing you can do. Ask yourself, for any of those emotions, how are they defined? Because any of those emotions, if it's anger, if it's anxiety and worry are different, but you may feel them in different times and different ways. What are their definitions? Go and study that. And then ask yourself, what's the last time you felt this way? And then what triggered you? Because understanding what triggers you is an awareness based on the fact that you can now know what to do. Because prior, what would happen is that you'd be triggered by something and you don't know what's happening here, and you get mad, or you just lose your cool when you're supposed to handle a situation better. So self-awareness is first, understanding those triggers, especially the stress-related ones, and then knowing how to proactively engage them is part of that journey of self-awareness, where you know this emotion comes to me when I go through this, and this is how I react. Now, if this is how I react, then how do I need to handle it better? Part of that journey. And not just that, the second thing is building a good support network. Being proactive, being intentional, going out there and finding people who can listen to you, who can offer the support you need, not just in your organization, but in the vast universe around you, because there are still groups of people who sort of like have the same hobbies as you, who look at the world the same way you do. Find that support that can be able to allow you to build positive relationships, and then develop healthy habits. You'll always say, you know what, I'm late at home. Let me just get a tub of ice cream. Let me eat that thing. And in your 20s, you know, your body is burning things up very quickly. But let me tell you, oh boy, in your 30s, it grows slower. And then you start expanding. And then you wonder, why am I unhealthy? And then you reach your 40s, and then you're wondering, what happened? I'm so successful, but my health is in the dogs. So develop those healthy habits now. It's a priority for you to start building your gym, your exercising, your balanced mental state. It's important. Take care of your mind. It's a habit you can actually curate. And then learn to reframe your challenges, because here's the thing. I do this nifty thing every day because I'm constantly developing a gratitude mindset. I write 10 things that I'm grateful for every day. And in here, you can write things that you find challenging, things that were small wins for you. You don't have to have dramatic, big wins for you to be able to celebrate them. And those things that are mundane, the fact that you're alive, the fact that you can walk, the fact that you can breathe, that's a mundane, but you need to be grateful for that. But let's go back to the challenges, because when you're able to see challenges as something you're grateful for, you start on this journey of reframing how you see things around you. And that's so pertinent and so powerful in how you practice your emotional regulation. Because if something wrong happens at the workplace, and it seems like the world is just about to break apart, and then for a strange reason, you're grateful for it, I promise you, the outcome emotionally is very different from someone who sees the world as breaking apart at any point in time. And then set those realistic goals, as Wairimu has constantly told us. Boundaries, boundaries, boundaries. Set them well. Back to you, Michelle.
Thank you so much, Edwin. Wow, I love this. I think the participants also saying really enjoying this conversation. Thank you for being here. So I really love what Edwin is saying. Just to recap, so self-awareness, we cannot stress this enough. Sorry for that. So if you don't know yourself, there's someone who's saying, if you cannot lead yourself, you cannot lead others, right? So learn how to understand how you work and how your body works, your mind and your soul, right? Proactively engage, right? So how do you handle your emotions? Or is it those things where you pack and then one day you blow up, right? Then the other thing he said, sorry for that, building a support network. So there's one podcast I listened to a while back, and it was saying you cannot have one well that you are drawing from. So Wairimo cannot be the person who I go to for every problem, right? At some point, Wairimo will be like, what's wrong with Michelle, right? Then she have other wells that she's drawing from. So, but if you have a network that you've built, because people come with different, capacities and skills, they can be able to pour into your cup, and you can be able to see things holistically, as opposed to you either having one outlet and or having no outlet at all. So build that network for yourself. So developing healthy habits, we are habitual creatures, right? They slowly creep in. Those small things that you do will eventually catch up to you. So how do you cope, right? So someone was saying, alcohol is a good thing until something bad happens to you. And then you will become an alcoholic, right? Because it starts with one small glass, or it starts with a tot, right? And then it moves to a glass. And then now you're doing a bottle. Now you're doing a crate. And you've become an alcoholic. So you're one setback away from your life turning upside down in the wrong way. But that also ties into how we view challenges, as Edwin has told us. So most times when bad things are happening to us, we always think, oh my God, it's the end of the world, right? But we could ask ourselves, what is this trying to teach us? How can I avoid doing this the next time? And then something I've also learned recently is, what role did I play in this particular incident, right? So most times we're always blaming people for things that are happening to us, but then you're not also asking yourself what role you played. So thank you so much for that, Edwin. I think all of us who are here in the room, we should learn how to journal more, we should exercise more, and eat healthier, right? Just to build ourselves, for the next 50 years that we plan on being alive, or 80, right? Or 90, yeah? So thank you so much for that, Edwin. So, Wairimo, last question of the day. So the people here who, as you said, there's a conversation we had earlier on, and you were talking about if you're in a toxic work environment, you'd want to leave, but then you think about bills. I mean, we all have bills. I mean, in Kenya, our economy can be, in the gutters. So you're thinking, what do I do? So for someone who's stuck in a toxic work environment and doesn't have an immediate option to leave, what can they do? One, to better prepare themselves, for any outcome. And two, to prepare themselves or to actually get the courage to leave. Again, you said that, upping and living in a toxic environment can be, also a tall order for most people. So what can we do if we are stuck in toxic work environments and we don't have an immediate option to leave? Yeah.
I think so. For this one in particular, I think the first step would be planning your exit, having an exit plan, because again, at the end of the day, is leaving. Because again, environments change you more than you can change them. So it's very unlikely you'll suddenly make your boss understanding, or it's very, very unlikely. So start having an exit plan, be very, very intentional about it. I think the second thing is what Edwin is emphasizing on a lot. It's self-awareness and knowing how to approach many situations. So you need to find a level of detachment in terms of there's what will be happening within the environment, but there's how you react to it, and there's how much you allow it to affect you. So while you're still in there, find a level of detachment, do your work. Don't, I don't know, nowadays we're calling it quiet quitting, but still do your work. And then but don't let everything get to you, right? So even if you get one of those, because I've had friends who will tell me, oh, my boss wrote a message, and I'm like, this is so unprofessional, and it ruins your whole day. I've been there. You see a message and your productivity just goes down. You don't want to deal with that work anymore, but just be able to, what do we call it, compartmentalizing. So just don't let it get to you, don't let it affect you, because that's who they are. It says nothing about you. And unfortunately, the problem with toxic environments, in a way, they start seeping into you. You start wondering, am I that bad at work? Remember, at the end of the day, validate yourself. If you're good enough, you're good enough. So it's not about you, it's about them. Remember that all the time. This is who they are. That's a character. It's an environment that's bad. It says nothing about you. So just do your work, document everything. One of the beauties of, well, you can't avoid it. One of the beauties of countries like Kenya and most organizations is they are required to have a level of, they can just, there's a level you can take action if you wanted. You can go to HR, you can even, there are levels you can take because there are labor laws that really protect employees. So make sure you document things that happen as much as possible, as much as possible. Make sure you document everything. Those conversations, keep them. Everything that's happening, keep it. But I think in summary, I would say, one, have an exit plan, start working on it. Two, self-awareness. Don't let everything affect you. Find a way to detach and just do your job. Three, support systems are very important. Have somewhere you can, just have people you can talk to and all that. And then make sure you put a lot of your energy on out of work things, right? Find hobbies that you do over the weekends because work takes up a lot of your time. So if you spend all your time at work and it drains you, and then you go home, my therapist used to tell me that unfortunately, even in marriages, a lot of people, the reason marriages have a lot of issues is people will take in so much at work, but they can't do anything about it at work. So they bring it all home. So you need to be able to, that energy shifts and get a better energy for outside there. Go have fun with your family, with your friends. Just invest in other things. Start running if you have to. Things like exercise really help in terms of, regulating yourself, your nervous system, clear mind, and, distressing. So just find other outlets for what you do, shift your energy elsewhere, and then hopefully we pray you get out of that environment eventually. But yeah, that's ideally what I would encourage someone to do. Invest in other things. Let that be your that job.
Thank you so much for that, Sharimo. Wow, amazing nuggets from everyone here. So I love the fact that she says, one, detach yourself. Because, we cannot avoid the fact that we are emotional human beings. All of us, even if it's, those people who are very logical, you tend to have a huge chunk of your brain that is very emotional. Just detach yourself and, just do your work, right? And then I love the one thing that she said is do things out of work. So the problem with most of us is that we let our jobs define us, right? So for example, today, if Edwin gets global, I don't know, let's call it partnerships manager for Visa. So his whole life and his whole identity will be global partnerships manager for Visa. Edwin is a brother, is a son, is so many other things apart from global partnerships manager for Visa. So you should have an identity outside work. It's nice to have all these fancy, catchy things that we all have and, to just chase this career milestones, but then don't let them define you, right? Because at the end of the day, you are so much more, and you cannot be so much more if not put effort to build this other life outside work. So you'll end up being your work. So thank you for that, Wairimo. So I think we can do closing reflections, and then we'll move into the Q&A sessions from the participants. So Wairimo, if you could just summarize it in 2 or 3 words, what could you say about prioritizing your mental health at work to all these listeners here? So there are people who are in school looking forward to get to work. There are people who are already at work. 2 or 3 sentences just to wrap it up.
Yeah, so I'd say this is an inclusive, it's more of a combined effort by everyone involved. Organizations really need to take a step forward in terms of being the ones who create that culture, in terms of trying to kill hustle culture, but making sure they're giving in the resources that make everyone feel that they don't need to do too much, providing the resources for these things, providing ways people can take a break, actually even celebrating people with work-life balance. I know a lot of effort has gone into that, and I've seen so many organizations taking these initiatives, so that's very key. And then as well, in terms of people, employees need to as well also be very self-aware. They need to advocate for mental health resources. You can even start initiative yourselves. You can wake up one day and say, oh, we should start doing this at work, and all that stuff. Know your boundaries, set your boundaries for sure. Always set your boundaries. Have, like you said, have an identity out of work, because people whose whole identity revolve around work are the ones who suffer the most when work stops being rewarding. So have an identity out of work, have a life that's bigger than your job. And yeah, so boundaries, self-awareness, having an identity out of work, and again, just finding ways to decompress. I really encourage sports as something to help you deal with your mental health. So find a sport that you like, something that you enjoy to do on the side that just helps you debrief. So yeah, and then have a good support system as well, a great community, people you can talk to, people you can debrief to, Yeah, I think that's basically it. The support is there, the companies are there, and as long as you have your boundaries and you have your standards and you know what you're looking for, you have already identified as a person what you want from a workplace, the opportunities will come, the right opportunities for you, or you will create them wherever you are. Yeah.
Thank you, Arimo. I love that abundance mindset, guys. You hear that? Like there are opportunities out there, right? Instead of thinking, oh, I haven't found workplaces that have, just tell yourself, there are there and I will find them. And just to also recap one last thing, someone once, or they always keep telling me, right? It takes a village to raise a child, right? You're not an island, right? Look for your village. Who is your village? Who is your community? So I want you to keep asking yourself, who is your village? Who's your community? So Edwin, wrap it up for us. 2 or 3 sentences, things that you would want us to pick it up and run with them. Yeah.
Okay, so fundamentally, as a habits coach, this is what I will say. Small, consistent habits create lasting change in mental well-being. Small, consistent. Not this gusto of changes and you desiring to shift so many things at the same time. Small, consistent. And as we have spoken about the need to reduce stress, the need to enhance your emotional well-being, and setting your clear boundaries, practicing mindfulness, and all the things that come with mindfulness, here are a couple of things that I would suggest you to do. And all this has to be intentional. Remember, the intentionality that habits create is predicated on you deciding today that every day you're going to do certain things on a daily. Okay, so once you've done that, be clear in terms of being able to normalize health discussions. Those things that revolve around your health and wellness being important, normalize them. Talk to people on a daily. Find small things that you can do on a daily to ensure that it's not going to wait until things have crashed. That's when you need to take care of it. Number 2, there is that aspect of habit stacking. I encourage all of you to understand that we all habitual creatures. And if you're habitual, it's like you run, basically learning how to write. So learn about habits, the fact that they're triggers, they're cues, they're actions that take place. Therefore, understand those micro habits that you can introduce into your life that don't take too long, but make you become more powerful in what you do. I'll give you an example. Every morning for 15 minutes, I do exercise. And then I decide to run not so as frequently as every day, but 3 or 4 times a week, or 3 times a week. But the aspect of exercising for 15 minutes, most of us take for granted. Yet, it is a very powerful thing that can actually change your life. Know that you can also do mindfulness breathing. Do you know how important breathing is to your life? Most of us don't. We just take it for granted. I'm breathing, so it's okay. Let's just breathe. But being intentional and cognizant of the fact that mindful breathing actually brings air into your body and allows you to have the energy you need is critical. And then support each other. We like to believe that our problems are very unique to ourselves. Like, I'm the one who's suffering. I'm the only one who's going through this thing. It's a lie. You're unique, yes. You're different, yes. But your problem is not unique. So talk about it. Find your own community of people. Support each other. When someone says, I'm feeling, but I just need someone to talk to, be that listening ear, because next time it will be you. And then finally commit to growth. Growth is so important because what you know right now is predicated on what you have learned this far. But if you take time to grow, you might be shocked that at the end of the year, you might learn something that possibly could save your life. I read every week at least a book or 2. It changes everything. It changes your perspective. The only thing that can change your perspective is the new ideas and thoughts that come to you and you willingly taking them up. There's no other way. So if you are going through stress, ask yourself, are there things that I can learn that could change my life completely? So commit to growth. It's a very critical thing. So in finality, I'll tell you that mental health isn't a one-stop fix. It's a habit we build over time. Back to you, Michelle.
Oh, wow, this is really rich. So thank you so much, Edwin, for that. Commit to growth. I saw someone reiterate that in the comments or the chat. So yeah, commit to growth. You have to grow. I mean, even trees grow. So we need to commit to growth. Yeah. So Edwin also said small, consistent habits create lasting change. So we've kept on saying that over and over again. So think and, just audit your life. What are these bad habits you're having, and which are these good ones you want to maintain? Also, gratitude, right? Reframing how we see things, right? And I like how he said sometimes when you're going through something, you think, oh, yeah, I'm the only one going through this. And then you talk to people and they tell you, oh, yeah, even at this point in my life, this was happening. This is what I did. So have this community where you consistently speak out. I mean, they say empty mouths don't get fed. Also, if you're close shut about what you're going through, it's very hard to find support within your ecosystem. Breathing. I mean, it's something we all probably don't think about, right? When you're frustrated or stressed, but take a moment to breathe, allow yourself to calm down, right? And I think the last thing is normalizing mental health discussions within our circles. Because again, just going back to the point where whatever you're going through is not unique. Couple of people have gone through it, couple of people will go through it after you. So be the support that you would want to have whenever you're going through something. So thank you so much, Wairimo and Edwin, for this very insightful nuggets that you've shared. So I want to open up the floor to Q&As that have been posted in the chat, and those that probably people have and haven't posted. So I'll start with those from the chat. So there is one. What do you do when you find yourself in a male dominant job when you're sometimes looked down upon? Hello, am I clear? Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, please.
Tuerimo, what do you do?
Touch yourself. I think touch yourself. So from experience, what I've learned is sometimes what women tend to do when they find themselves in male dominant jobs, especially when they're being looked down upon, is they shrink themselves. Which unfortunately, when it comes to things like promotions and all that, the leadership will look at you in terms of, oh, you can't really assert yourself. So we can't even give you a leadership role because if your colleagues are making you, shy away and all that. So you need to genuinely assert yourself, continue asserting yourself because I've been there. So just assert yourself. Again, validate yourself. You're good enough. Don't let the voices get to you and what you're saying. You need to know yourself. Again, comes back again to self-awareness. You need to be aware of yourself. You need to be aware of the inputs that you're bringing onto the table. And then again, set boundaries with them. If you find yourself in meetings and now because you're a lady, they won't send you for things, don't agree. Say no, that is not your job. Don't say it's not your job, but find a way to respectfully decline. Make sure you're heard in meetings and your points are heard. Take credit for what you have done. Women tend to not take credit, so they just quietly go through other people in such fields. So you need to I think my summary is assert yourself. Assert yourself. Over time, it's going to be very frustrating in the beginning. And in the beginning, when it's frustrating, everything Edwin has told us, just apply it in terms of mindfulness and all that. But over time, as you grow in your career, it will become, I think I'm going back to what Edwin is saying. If you do it enough times, you do it effortlessly. So just keep saying no, keep asserting yourself, keep taking space. It gets easier with time. It won't get easier immediately, but from experience, it gets easier with time. And the respect is just going to be there. So yeah.
Thank you for that, Werimo. I think just to add on to what Werimo is saying, because I've been in spaces where I'm in a department, the men, and you're the only lady there. And sometimes they can be gatekeepers, right? But then the one thing I've also found that women do when you're in a meeting and, they're asking, okay, who has something they want to add? So you shouldn't be that person who, you have something valuable to add and you're just there keeping quiet, saying, after the meeting, I should have said this. No, say it there and then, because you have value to bring to the table. So speak out, assert yourself. I love that. run with that, assert yourself. So Edwin, there's a question that's
Sorry, and to add before I'm done, and align yourself correctly. It's very important in work cultures to make sure important people hear you. It's very, I don't know if I can emphasize this enough. Make sure important people hear what you have to say. The same thing you're saying, if it's in a meeting, speak up then. Even if you have an idea, share it with Exco, try and get it through. So that even if you get too much pushback from the male-dominated fields or the men, you have backup. People have already seen, they have seen your expertise, they have heard you, they know you're a very good resource to have. So align yourself. It's very important to align yourself correctly in workplaces. Be friends with other women, learn how they have also navigated that within the same industry. There are so many Slack chats, so many communities on LinkedIn that have people that are industry led. Find these communities, be in them. You can learn a lot from people who've already been there. So yeah.
Thank you, Arimo. I love that additional point, aligning yourself. There's someone who told me you should know the person who calls the shot. I've forgotten what they call them, but in every organization, there's that person who, the executive, directors will listen to the, what is it called? The insights more. So learn to push your agenda or learn to push, whatever ideas you have through those people. If you're not given a space to speak, and or get yourself in a place where people are actually learning what you're doing and seeing, be visible, put yourself out there. So Edwin, I have 2 questions for you. So someone asked how they can master self-awareness at work. That's number 1. And then number 2, how can you be assertive and align yourself correctly? No, let's leave that alone. So how can you practice self-awareness at work? And then number 2, someone asked, how do we know, or how do we master ourselves? Over to you, Edwin.
Okay. Let's unpack that for a minute. Self-awareness at work. Self-awareness all goes back to you, not the work. Self-awareness. You can be self-aware at work, you can be self-aware at home, you can be self-aware in any environment. But the most important thing is self-awareness. Because instinctively, how we've been taught or brought up to think is that in any place you show up, you have to wear a mask. So that question, if I was to unpack it further, it's about which mask do I wear in order to be aware of myself. And here is what I'm telling you. You don't need to wear any masks if you truly understand the journey of your life and how you operate emotionally. Given the fact that statistics say that 95% of people are not self-aware. So literally, out of everyone here, if we do the stats, very few of us are self-aware. And here's the thing, it doesn't have to be onerous because the tools are there for us to start with. Earlier, I mentioned Brené Brown, and I mentioned that she's done a wonderful piece of research around emotions. If you go out, and you can even type it down right now, the Atlas of Emotion, 87 emotions from Brené Brown, you'll see it. And in there, it will give you all the emotions. And then where you can start from is understanding those emotions for yourself and why they are triggered in a particular way. Now, here's the next question. Given that you are beginning to understand yourself, and remember, there are ways in which you behave at home, which could be toxic or right. There are ways in which you behave at work, which could be toxic or not. But also remember, you spend a lot of your time at work. So literally, you're spending less time home, and you're spending more time at work with people who are not even your friends, but acquaintances. But you still have to work with them because you're moving towards a target, a goal that has been set for you. Then it's very important to know yourself. Take time, understand these 87 emotions. Take time to understand how they're triggered based on habit. Take time, and that calls for quiet reflection. As you're journaling, you say, okay, I'm going to do a bit of work. I'm going to spend this month just understanding these emotions. And as a habits coach, what I normally do is I tell people, okay, first understand what that emotion is about. Understand how it's triggered in you. Understand when it was the first time you experienced it. What was the latest time you experienced it? And then take time to process it. because there's insights in understanding that emotion. Many of us could be angry all the time, and you wonder, why am I so angry all the time? Or you could be anxious. Every time someone claps, you're anxious. So you have this fight or flight mechanism that's digging in your brain. So what do we say here? In totality, take time to understand self-awareness. It will make a difference in any environment, not just work, but any environment that you interact with. It will allow you to regulate, and it will allow you to be socially aware, especially at work. I don't know if I've answered that question.
Yes, you have, Edwin, for that. So just to also chime in what you said. So if you do not understand yourself and what triggers you, I remember the one thing that, for me has been a deal breaker is I don't understand people who shout. So for me, anybody who shouts, I always feel like this is a threat, right? So at some point, I had to sit down and ask myself, but why is shouting such a trigger for me? So I had to go back to the first instance I saw people shouting or someone shouting at someone else. And I realized just because of that one instance, I ended up working with West Africans at some point, and they happened to be loud. So I took their loudness for shouting. And so that meant that whatever this person was trying to tell me, whether it was good or bad, in my head, I'd have already blocked it as this person is shouting at me, they're coming at me, right? So if we don't become self-aware, then that means we not show up at work as our best selves, for lack of a better word. So thank you so much for that, Edwin and Wairimo. So I'll take one more question from the audience. So you can either raise your hand and then ask the question, and or type it out in the chat, and then we'll get them to respond. So 20 seconds for that. Or I can see one has asked in the chat. So Dolly has asked, how do you handle a boss who easily loses their temper and easily overreacts and quarrels? So I think both of you can answer, and then we can wrap it up. So Wairimo or Edin, whoever wants to go first.
Let me chime in. Wairimo, you can wonderfully just close it up, given your past experiences. So here's the thing. We have to understand that you own your emotions. That's a fundamental truth. You own your emotions. If someone comes at you angrily, upset, about to strike you down, you own your emotions. So if they come at you aggressively, you decide to be angry, and you're not able to interact with that, it means that you're internalizing that emotion. And what does it do? Creates stress, puts you in a situation where you could get unhealthy as time goes by, because also not processing emotions accurately can also be a mental issue and also a health issue to you. Therefore, understanding everything that comes against you is only a stimuli is very important. You have the power to either decide, you know what, I'm not going to handle this, I will dial out a little bit. And as time goes by, you'll be able to handle it better, because people tend to know who to bully. Bosses do that. If they know they can bully you, and they know the reaction that you're offering is this sort of reaction, as a human being, they'll come back at you again, and they'll do it worse and worse. And guess what? It will affect you in a more negative way as you go down the road. So understand how you first take up anything that comes against you. And then also the language you use. Given someone is abrasive, or they're easily losing their temper, or they're quarrelsome or so forth, know the right words to use at any time. You could also tamper down their quarrelsome nature. Have you ever met someone who you come at them angry, but then when you look at their face and their posture, they're so relaxed, you even start to doubt, okay, what's up with this person? So there are ways in which you can tamper that down, but it has to start with you knowing that you have the mastery over all the emotions you feel. Never say that they have made me angry, because it's you who has made yourself angry. So you have that power. Wairimo, I'm sure this is right up your alley.
No, I think you've covered it all. I think ideally you just need to manage yourself, because you can't manage the other person. Though, again, you need to set a boundary. It doesn't mean you need to allow them to do that next time. Even if setting the boundary is telling HR, is setting the boundary is later on when you're calm down, you tell them, hey, you spoke to me in this and this way. And usually I don't, that is not a communication pattern or a communication I am happy with. It will not help. You can say, if you're going to work together, we need to find a way for you to communicate better so that, I can be able to do my job effectively. So yeah, manage yourself, but draw the boundary at the end of the day, whether you'll do it later on. And I think that also answers the person who's also asking about the coworker who offends them. Just draw your boundaries. Just tell someone, I cannot engage with you further if you're not accountable for the way you act or react or, your behavior patterns. It's okay. You can allow people to be who they are, but they don't always have to do it in your space. They can do it wherever they are with whoever else they want to be, but it doesn't mean you accept it or you allow it in your own space, because you also have to build your own, peaceful space. Because even if you're working on yourself, you can't just be working on yourself and then now you're working on yourself on behalf of everyone else. They need to figure out what to do with their lives, but far away from you. So that's usually a philosophy I'm very keen on, and I think, yeah. So yeah, basically I agree with you, but set a boundary. Whether it's respected or not is besides the point. If it's not, just don't engage with them anymore, but set a boundary.
Thank you so much, Edwin and Wairimu. This has been very insightful. I like the fact that, Edwin has told us you own your emotions, right? You can't be telling people they made you angry. Of course, they did make you angry, but are you going to stay angry? Like, you can't be mad the whole time. So own your emotions, right? And then I like that, Edwin has also said understanding the language that you use. Because sometimes, there's a dog with a bone, and if a dog wants a bone, they will go for the bone. So if you're there, someone is hurling up words at you and you keep hurling words back, I mean, you are going to look like that person, probably even worse, right? Because you are fueling that flame. I like that Warimo says setting boundaries. It's something I had to learn because, again, I was working with someone who would constantly be rude and constantly, using weird words, yeah, right? So you have to constantly push that boundary and tell them, you cannot be speaking to me like that. I will not engage. I even started asking them whenever they would come at me, is everything okay at home? Then they would sit back and ask themselves, like, am I okay? Right? So you would just ask them, is everything okay at home? But why are you shouting, right? So set that boundary, right? Because if you don't, you will end up being a doormat where everyone will step on. So I'd really like to thank, the participants for being here. Thank you for being so engaging. Thank you for listening in. Thank you for even posting up your takeaways in the chat. Thank you so much. We're glad that this has been insightful. I would also like to thank Wairimu and Edwin for taking their time off their busy schedules. It is on a Friday evening. They would be doing their own things, trying to actualize their lives as they define themselves outside their careers. But they chose to be here, and we are really, really grateful. Thank you for sharing your wisdom and your insights and your time. Thank you so much. So we would like to end this here. If you have any questions, you can get Wairimu on LinkedIn as Wairimu Njoki. Edwin, you'll also still find him on LinkedIn as Edwin Moindi. So if you have any questions, feel free to ask them or shoot the questions there. And or even you can send the questions over to me, and I'll be able to channel them back to them, and then give you back a response. So thank you so much for being here. Have a great weekend. Enjoy yourselves. I don't know if it's a holiday back in these other countries. I can see we are all Pan-African. I've seen people from South Sudan, from Ghana, from Lagos. Thank you so much. Enjoy your weekend and continue asserting yourselves and prioritizing your mental health. Thank you.
Beyond the skies, you and I, we're breaking bounds on bounds.